Here, it's about 3 o'clock. So, hi, my name is Jamie Peterson, and I am the tech and data coach at Woodward Granger. I'm in kindergarten through 5th grade. I work at the elementary for Woodward Granger. And today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about reaching literacy students with tech creation and collaboration. Really quickly, I'd like you to click on the little Padlet link on the presentation and tell us a little bit about what your intervention time looks like in your school or your district. A lot of my presentation today is geared towards that time. Just wondering what you guys' looks like as well. So I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. Similarities with the fast testing data. At Woodward Granger, we're using that as well. Lots of level groups. I see 20 minutes. That's what ours at Woodward Granger's is to, about 20 minutes. So it seems like a lot of us have a similar time and a similar way of finding what those kids need. So that's kind of interesting and good. And then about ours, we have a reading and math intervention time that's 20 minutes a day, and we do that every day except Wednesday. Wednesday is our PD day, so we get out early. For our math intervention, we do CFAs weekly, and then our groups are based on meter skill or extension. And then for our reading intervention, we use the FAST data, which we haven't even had a chance to get groups going yet this year because of that mess, but we won't go there. And yeah, we use the CDMR and the A reading assessment, and we try to break it into fluency, skill sets, and then extension for those kids that need it. So I'm kind of going to be focusing on that extension group today. When I started working in this role, I was a former second grade teacher, and I hadn't had a whole lot of experience with working with those older kids and didn't really know exactly what I was going to do with those kids. And there's those nice, books of skills to do with the people that, well, one second. Those books are out there for kids that need that extra help, but there's not a whole lot of resources or things to do with those high flyers. So I was kind of stuck with, what am I going to do with these kids? So I kind of went through and tried some different things. I used a lot of Google Classroom with my group. I had about 25 kids in my group that were all above grade level on that college pathway for both the fluency and the A reading piece. So we did a couple different things within that. The first thing that we tried out, or what I tried out with them, was trying just to do some units of interest, finding a topic that they were interested in, that sounded cool to them, and just doing some reading, some research, and with that I was embedding some skills within there without them knowing. So one of the few big things that we did was taking a stand on the topic. We had a great big debate. That was a huge, big deal that they were preparing for. They prepared for a few weeks with researching, reading articles, reflecting on what they read, and then taking a stand, answering questions after their reading, just a reflection. And then I had some different graphic organizers that we were able to put into Google Classroom that they could work with on their computers after they were reading some different articles as well. So I'm going to show you some of the different resources that I use with those kinds of things. How many of you have heard of Newsela? Is that one you've used? Okay, about half of you. So Newsela is pretty awesome in that you can kind of create, one thing that I really like about it is you can create some, text set, I guess is what they call it. It was like a binder or different things like that. You can go, so I went in and looked for all the free printing articles that I thought were interesting that the kids could go in and look at. They just had to click a link and there they were. They could choose from those several different articles. So Newsela is really nice in regards to that. The other nice thing about Newsela, if you haven't used it before, they have a Lexile level tool up here, so you can change the different Lexile levels, and with FastBridge, you have a report that you can look up that's called Screen Intervention, and that Screen Intervention report has the Lexile levels or ranges for all of the students that you have, so you can kind of get an idea of where those kids should be reading those articles at, or how you're going to challenge them, if you're going to ramp it up or whatever you would do with that. So really like Newsela. Another nice resource is that PBS Learning Media. I'm not going to go to that one. I think most of you probably seen that before. Lots of articles, lots of videos, reliable sources, the things that kids are going to be able to read and get something out of. YouTube, of course, but with YouTube, I would use Edpuzzle. And I don't know if you've heard of Edpuzzle before. I'll show you a quick little peek of that. Basically what it is a tool that you can take a piece of a video, and instead of having, let's say there's a 7-minute video, you want them to watch the first 3.5 minutes of it. So you're able to cut the video in certain spots. There's also parts where you can add in quiz questions or things like that with it, so they're having that engagement all the way through. My favorite piece of this is that it, of course, connects with Google Classroom, if I can get it to work. And it lets me share my videos that I have cut or just found on here through Google Classroom. For some reason, it won't let me click it. See. If I'm going to share it, it gives me all my Google Classroom classrooms that I can send.
And you can stop them from skipping. Is that what they're preventing in the video, so they have to watch it? Right? Okay.
Yeah, so like that. One other thing another website that I've kind of stumbled upon the last couple of years is this Dogo. They have a news, books, and movies thing. I use the news primarily. It's current events, lots of different interesting articles, again, that tie to Google Classroom. If you guys use Clever in your districts, it's got a link that you can put on your Clever. And this one doesn't have the Lexiles like Newsela does, but one nice thing is that it has the read to you feature. So this could be used at any level if you have kids that, you know, struggle with the reading piece of it. If this is too high of a text for them, they could at least listen to it.
Astronaut Recruits Report for Training by Hannah Sheriff on October 16, 2017. Many kids dream of venturing into space to search for new planets.
And I won't go through the whole thing, but just so you get an idea. So those were my big pieces that I used, my big resources that I would use when I would do these units of interest with the kids. And integrating in that into Google Classroom helped considerably because I was able to give it to everybody in all one shot. And a lot of times as the tech integrationist and data coach, I'm not always in the building, and when I am not in the building, I was still able to give those kids those resources or those things to do during that intervention time. So it wasn't that they were just stuck. So it made it nice for us to be able to still work, have the kids still work even if I wasn't there. Another nice thing, a Google Classroom feature is that you can have the classroom teachers of those students in with your Google Classroom as well. They can be collaborators with that, so they can see the work that you've been doing with the kids. I mentioned earlier that I would have the kids do some online graphic organizers with the different things that I would give them, the different articles. Two of my favorite places to get those resources was Ditch That Textbook is Matt Miller. He's a blogger that does a lot of different things with just changing the way that you do things in your classroom, and he had created several different graphic organizers on Google Drawing, and he shared those with his readers, I think it was last year. But I put the link to that on my presentation, so you want to check that out. There's also directions and ways that you can kind of make your own if you need to. He's created some things, resources for that. So really enjoy that, and it's nice and easy to use. The other one that I've been using lately is a Read, Write, Think, and I know that website's been around for a while, but they have some really good resources for graphic organizers. The one that I used was the persuasion map in the last intervention group that I was with. They were able to get started, and I'm not going to go through it all, but they put their name in, it would let them type in the document, they were able to save it and go back to it if they didn't finish, or they were able to send the final product to me via email. So it worked out pretty nicely. That one's a little bit trickier than Google just because it doesn't save automatically and you don't have that nice feature with the share button and that kind of stuff, but for 5th grade it worked out really well. I think you could probably do it for 4th or higher, so.
Is that on Chromebooks? Is that what your kids have?
We do.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Any other questions? I should ask that a while ago. Improve them on it. All right. So, wanted to share the collaboration and creation piece with this unit of interest that I did. We decided to take a stance on a topic. We were talking about 3D printing. The whole thing happened, there was a kid in our group that had a 3D printer at home, and there was this whole thing. He was bringing fidget spinners, homemade fidget spinners, homemade all sorts of different things, and the kids were super intrigued by it. And so we thought, well, why don't we look into it a little bit more and research it and see what it's all about. And so we kind of stumbled across the fact that it may not be the most safest thing to do is using 3D printers and printing different things. So we started getting into that research and thinking and deciding on whether they thought it was good or bad. So they kind of formed a couple different groups and created presentations to have their big debate. So everybody had a chance to work together on those and created a slide for each person got to create a slide depending on their stance. And one nice thing about Google Slides, as you know, is that it doesn't have to be worked on face-to-face. They could be in 3 different classrooms. We have 3 different 5th grade classrooms. They could be working on the same presentation or slide, and they were able to do that without having to be right next to each other. So,
Jamie, I have another quick question.
Yeah.
So everybody was doing, all the group was, everyone was doing 3 printers. Like on Newsella then, did they have to change up their lexile, or you just put articles of various lexiles and the kids knew their score?
Yes, so I gave them a range. The kids that I was working with were the more extension kids. The
So
kids
probably one group,
So-
is that the deal?
Yeah, so it was, they were able to go in. I would give them a range where they needed to be in, so they would check and look to see where that range was and click that lexile level.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yeah,
And each article has that capability.
yeah.
Kind of the last thing that I did with this group was just have a reflection of how and what they did. Asking them, I think it's important to ask the kids about what they learned and how they felt about what they learned. I mean, it gives you an idea of if they, enjoyed it and making learning fun, those kinds of things. And I didn't put it on this form, but getting input for the next unit of interest, you might be able to find something that they would all enjoy. So getting that feedback from kids is really important. So that was one of my pieces of my intervention. The other big piece that I tried to do was a Genius Hour, which it was kind of a modified Genius Hour because we had 20 minutes a day, 4 days a week. So it was kind of a little bit of a stretch for Genius Hour, but it worked for what we were doing. If you haven't heard of Genius Hour or need a refresher, I'm going to play a quick little video on what it is, so you will know.
Genius Hour begins with a simple premise. Give your students 20% of their class time to learn what they want. They choose the content while also mastering the skills and hitting the academic standards. With Genius Hour, students own the entire journey. They choose the topics based upon their own geeky interests. It doesn't have to be a traditionally academic area. They might like fashion or food or sports or Legos or Minecraft or deep sea creatures. Students ask the questions and engage in their own research to find the answers. Along the way, they design their own plan of instruction. They decide on the resources and activities, and each student sets goals and engages in self-assessment. They work at their own pace and set their own deadlines. Students decide on the grouping. Some work alone, others work in pairs or in small groups. In the end, students figure out what they will make and how they will share it with the world. A word of caution: it's not a total free-for-all. The best Genius Hour projects have systems and structures that empower students to reach their full potential. Even so, there will be mistakes, and you'll have to experiment. But in the end, students are empowered to be self-directed learners, engaging in creativity and critical thinking. In other words, they own the learning.
So I really like that idea of giving the kids their own, way of finding something they wanted to research, to look at. And it says, you had to give them some restraint or it's not a complete free-for-all. So I did give them some expectations and I gave them a little bit of parameters. But for the most part, I let them kind of do their own thing. Of course, I had to approve it, but they did a really awesome job. So I'm going to kind of go through the process of what we did and how we did it. If you have any questions, please feel free to yell out. I'm not going to be upset for you to interrupt. Introduction here. So I kind of went through with the kids and gave them some expectations. I showed them that same video and just gave them an idea of what was going to be expected of them, what they were going to do. I kind of adapted this from a couple different things. I have some resources at the end of my presentation that you will find some of this stuff. But I kind of created this or adapted this for what would work for our kids. I mean, pretty self-explanatory. A lot of working on with their computers, a lot of research. I didn't have a whole lot of problems with people feeling lost, overwhelmed, or uninspired. Luckily, I mean, I think that could be a possibility, but the topics that they chose, they ended up being really enjoyable for all the kiddos. The next kind of piece that we talked about is how to ask thin versus thick questions. And I think that was a pretty difficult part for those kids to kind of understand. But I showed them this quick video. I'm not going to show you this whole thing, but they had to explain to the kids after they saw this, if you can Google it and find the answer immediately, it's not a big question. So we're going to be digging deeper than just the basic surface level questioning. And that wasn't easy for all the kids, but you know, after some practice and after some critiquing and talking through it, they did a good job and were able to kind of get those questions down and into those good, thick questions. We also did a graphic organizer to brainstorm some ideas on what they wanted to do. So I gave them this is from that Matt Miller Ditch That textbook. They had to come up with some topics in here and then maybe a couple questions that they kind of started thinking about when they were thinking about those different topics that they were coming up with. Here, I'll give you a student example real quick. Maybe. Oh, this is this was some of their research questions that they were coming up with. That was later. That was supposed to be down here. So after that, they create their research questions, 8 to 10 different questions. This is them answering. So I had them start with just writing their questions, and then I had them go back to this document, and I said, okay, now answer your questions. So what you see here is their questions and then their answers and research that they did with that. So, one of the pieces that I had them do, so they kind of got their topic, they figured out what they wanted to do. The next part that I had them do was an elevator pitch. So that was basically a 1-minute presentation explaining to me what they were doing, why they were doing it, and those kinds of things. I gave them guidelines for their pitch, if I can get to it. And it was pretty simple. I mean, it was a 1-minute presentation. I wanted them just to give me an overview, and I wanted them to be passionate about what they were doing. So I wanted them to be able to answer these questions for me. Why are you interested? What is your goal? What steps are you going to take? And how is it going to affect your audience? And again, as all of this I'm sharing with you, this isn't the true necessarily way to do Genius Hour. This is just how and what worked for me and the time that we had together with this great group. I'll show you a quick video example because I thought that...
Have you ever thought about how much it would cost for instrumental lessons? In fact, it can cost $30 to $80 just for an hour of instrumental lessons. And wouldn't it be nice if your parents didn't have to pay so much money just for you to play an instrument? Hi, I'm Ryan. I plan to create a YouTube video explaining all the basic beginner viola skills with at least 70 views on YouTube. I will also be creating a website explaining all of that also in greater detail. This will all be done by October 6th. Bye.
So that was for my kiddos, but that was just an example of how you could have them do their elevator pitch, or what people have done. So the next part after that, we had, with the elevator pitch, before I go on, I just had my kids do a presentation there with a slideshow, quick little 1-minute thing, like I said, and then we moved on to digging into the research. One activity that I did before we did the actual research is we talked about credible resources and how you can be misled sometimes to be thinking that things are credible when they're not. One of the activities that I created for them was a video. This is called a TES. I don't know if you've ever used this before, but basically what it is, and I haven't used it a whole lot, but it can give you little squares and it combines it all in one little spot, and it will, you give the kids like the link, and then everything's right here. It's almost like a slideshow. You have little slides that have the different pieces that you want to have them look at. You can embed video, you can just have text, you can link websites, all sorts of different things. Let's see, what did I do? But I use some of those classic websites that, like say the Pacific Northwest Triathlons. I don't know if you guys have seen that one before, but it's really hokey and silly. But I really wanted to show the kids how goofy some of that stuff is. So, and I had them look at 3 different resources and they had to decide whether it was a credible one or not. So, just wanted them to get thinking about that. I think I've showed this a bunch of different times. So again, the research questions, they came in, they answered the questions that they had on there from the beginning, and from there, they were to create a presentation. I, in my Genius Hour intervention group, did not let them use slideshow for this portion, just because it's just the same old thing over again. So I had them choose a different method of presentation. Before I go on, I wanted to say really quickly, I did have some reflections sprinkled in. I'd have them, I'd be using Google Classroom. So some days they'd come to their Google Classroom and it would say either you're working on research, you're doing your elevator pitch. Some days there was a reflection there. And it was just a 5-10 minute thing. I wanted them to reflect on their process, what they were doing, what they've been learning, different questions that they may have. This was just a kind of a touch base to make sure that they were, you know, on track to what they needed to be doing. So yeah, again, I didn't allow slideshow for this portion. I did allow, the choices that I used was video themselves, making a website, which was, I just had them use Google Sites. That was the easiest method there. All have Google tools. And Animoto, or a skit / acting, which was kind of interesting, but I did have some kids do that. So the only one that I didn't have people use was video of themselves, so we may have to get that one worked in next time, hopefully. So I can show you quick. Now, along with their video presentation, they had information in terms of it, but you can see really quickly here. Some of the things that they come up with in the site research is pretty amazing to me. I wouldn't thought about looking this up, but something did. along with that was a lot of conversation and a lot of questions, and they were the experts, and they were told that at the beginning. You have to be the expert. You have to field all the questions about this when it's your time to come up and talk about it. So they did a really awesome job with that. Let's see. So some of the collaboration pieces with Genius Hour. So I tried this the first semester just by themselves, just individual students. The second semester, we decided as I worked with one of the 4th grade teachers that had their extension intervention group, and we decided that we'd maybe come up with a Genius Hour, again modified to work with us and with our students to have them have a collaboration or a group piece. With that, we decided to do a topic, but within that topic, they were able to come up with or look up and research and discover about anything they wanted. So our big piece with that was the evolution of technology. So with that, there's kind of a lot of endless possibilities, and they did a really good job with coming up with some different interesting things that you wouldn't necessarily think about. But we had, this is our, this down here was our graphic organizer here. Before we got together, both the 4th grade teacher and I talked about collaboration and expressed how important it was for us to work together. I think sometimes kids, especially with that in that extension group, need that reminder of, okay, I don't know all the answers, or you know, my ideas are not the only ones that are going to work. So we talked extensively about how we were going to work together with the 4th grade kids, and then them with the 5th grade. We gave them a little more structure just because we had the 4th graders with us, and we wanted to make sure that they were coming along with us here. Our 5th graders were experienced with doing the Genius Hour process, but we added a couple more pieces in. We did the brainstorm like we did on the other one. We also did we had them fill in what their assignments were going to be once they figured out what their topic was going to be. So they had that structure of knowing what they were going to be looking for. At the very end here, I've kind of added in a couple places where I found some materials and resources that kind of got my ideas from. These two were helpful to me when I was developing my different Genius Hour stuff. So take a look at those if you're interested. And I believe that's about all I have for you today. Any questions that you have about what I've gone through?
So you see this would be the high level risk during the tag time, or this was separate from that time?
This was separate from that time.
Okay.
Our school does a school-wide MTSS time, reaching every learner.
Okay.
And that in that I was taking those higher kids
During
and doing
time.
it during that MTS,
Okay.
during that MTSS time. Well, please email me if you have any questions or come see me. I'd be happy to talk to you. Thank you for coming.